So forests, habitat for species at risk. We are also involved in most of the major environmental projects, infrastructure projects that impact the environment in some way or another, and where the city's center of expertise on biological, ecological issues. As was mentioned, I do have a PhD in biology. Colleague here who's just observing tonight. She's been a professional biologist. We have another professional biologist on the team, so we have a lot of expertise there. I'll just mention that the city is currently reviewing its wildlife strategy. That was written back in 2014, so it's now 10 years old and it needs an update. Things have changed in Ottawa over the last 10 years. We have a consultation page up on Engage Ottawa. So if you were to Google Engage Ottawa Wildlife Strategy, it'll take you straight to that page. You can see the old wildlife strategy. You can see when consultation meetings are planned, and you can see survey issues and any concerns. My focus tonight is on coyotes. This is a talk that I've given probably a dozen times or so over the last number of years. So I usually talk for about 20 minutes, 25 minutes, and then just have answer questions and have a discussion about that's what I'm hoping to do tonight. So coyotes are everywhere in Ottawa. In the rural areas, you probably know, Ottawa itself is about 2/3 rural. We're almost 3,000 square kilometers in size, and we have coyotes everywhere. Rural area, we've got them in the suburbs, we've got them in town. I live in Sandy Hill, and when I go for a walk along the River in the wintertime, I can see the tracks from coyotes in the snow along the riverbank because I hunt along the river. We have them everywhere. They avoid human contact, so most coyotes you will never know that they do tend to avoid human contact. They're just interested in finding food, and that's usually where we have problems arise. They are more obvious in the wintertime. So when Councillor Hill mentioned that starting to get complaints kind of like this, or reports late this winter, that's when we expect to get reports. And there's a couple of reasons for that. First of all, there are no leaves on the trees. So coyotes that are in a woodlot or in a natural area, they're a lot more visible. They also tend to congregate in larger groups in the wintertime. And you often hear those groups yipping and yapping. And they also mate in February. So we had probably the leading expert on urban coyotes come to 2 of our wildlife speaker series talks, and he likes to point out that the coyote mating period peaks on Valentine's Day, February 14th. So he thinks they're very romantic animals, and I wouldn't dispute him on that. As I mentioned, we have had him in twice to our wildlife speaker series. He was our first speaker back in 2014, I think it was, and we had him more recently about a year or two ago. 2020. Just COVID, right? I lose track. His last talk certainly is up on the city's website, and you can see if they're fascinating projects that he's done. Really great research, fantastic information. The coyotes we get around this area are commonly known as eastern coyotes. Coyotes themselves are a western plains animal that has migrated back east over the last couple hundred years, basically since European settlement. And on the way back, as they migrated back east, they have interbred with wolves. And so the eastern coyote is a bit larger than the western coyote, behaves a little bit differently. You'll hear people talk about coy wolves, you'll hear them talk about coy dogs, which are really not a thing. But they're all referring to the same thing, this eastern coyote, a little bit larger, a little bit really well adapted to urban environments, and some slight behavior differences that we're really still trying to figure out. When I talk about coyotes, I need to distinguish between hazard and risk. So those are two different things, even though they are related. So what is a hazard and what is a risk? I like to start using the example of lightning. So lightning is a hazard, right? You get hit by lightning, it can kill you. Very likely will. There are about 500 injuries from lightning across North America each year and about 50 deaths. It is definitely a hazard. But it's a low risk hazard. If you take precautions, you can almost guarantee that you will not be injured by lightning. There are millions of lightning strikes every year across North America, and about, as I said, about 500 injuries and about 50 deaths each year in North America. The same thing applies to coyotes. Coyotes are a hazard, absolutely. They're a medium-sized predator. They will prey on animals up to the size of humans. There are some records, very few, of predatory attacks on humans. Very, very few records. However, they are a very, very low risk. So, a hazard, but Dr. Gertz, the speaker we had come in, did some research, looked back at all of the reports of coyote attacks, went back, looked at the original records, looked at the original reports over about a 50-year period. And what he and his team found was, over that period, they could only confirm about 100, just over 140, so about 150 genuine attacks on people. Only 2 of those were fatal. And that last statistic has not changed since he did that report. In the last 50 odd years, there have only been 2 records of 2 fatal attacks by coyotes. One of those, unfortunately, was a very high-profile case in Cape Breton, where a runner, a young woman, was killed while she was running through the Cape Breton Highlands. Was killed by coyotes, and that's actually a case that Dr. Garrett was invited to come and investigate. So, yes, they're a hazard, but extremely low risk. The risk of being injured, the risk of being killed by a coyote is about 1,000 times less than the risk of being killed by lightning. It's about 1,000 times less than being killed by a domestic animal. So the risk is extremely low, and it is, again, an easily managed risk. And that's what we really like to talk about, is how you manage the risks from coyotes. So most adverse interactions, most conflicts occur around people's homes. And they almost always involve an animal that has become what we call habituated. That is, it's lost its fear of people. Coyotes lose their fear of people because either deliberately or inadvertently, we have been feeding them. I'll use the case, we had a coyote that regretfully had to be killed 2 or 3 years ago in Riverside South. It had been nipping at people. When the police went to investigate, it actually came up and started nipping at the police, and they were forced to destroy it. That coyote was exhibiting classic behavior of an animal that has been hand-fed. We are the cause of these issues. So the first thing we encourage to lower the risk of coyotes, particularly around your home, is don't be feeding them either deliberately or inadvertently. So there are, they feed on small mammals, they feed on plants, they feed on fruit. They're particularly reliant on things like fruit in the wintertime, and they will actually dig through the snow to get things like windfall apples below an apple tree. So the first thing is don't provide food sources in and around your house. If you feed your dog outside, don't do that. Bring the food in. If you have a garden in your backyard, even in wintertime, try and keep it fenced, so that it won't be attractive the coyotes won't be attracted. If you have an apple tree or a fruit tree, in the autumn, pick up that windfall fruit, compost it. Control your compost around your house. The other thing that will attract coyotes, and unfortunately bears, are bird feeders. So now, coyotes won't necessarily come and feed on seed, but they will come and feed on the mice and the voles that do feed on the seed that is falling to the ground. So if you've got a feeder and you're not cleaning up that seed right away, you are attracting mice and voles and things in there, and that's something that coyotes will come in and look for. That will attract coyotes. I'll just also add that inviting mice and voles and things into your backyard is possibly also inviting ticks into your backyard that you can mind. So you really want to make sure if you're going to have a bird feeder out, use best practices. Make sure that you're cleaning up that seed. So that's in your yard. The other time frequent coyote conflicts we get are when people are out walking their dogs, and it usually occurs in sort of one or two circumstances. Someone is walking their dog in kind of a bushy area. The dog is off leash, and the dog comes, wanders down the trail or off into the brush and then comes running back with a coyote chasing them. Or someone is walking a very small dog, rabbit size, along the trail, and a coyote comes out of the brush and meets a dash at the small dog. Again, two totally avoidable situations. Off-leash dogs, off-leash dogs are very likely to trigger defensive behavior. A large off-leash dog is going to trigger defensive behavior under a lot of different circumstances. Obviously, in mating season, if it's that time around February, and you have a female coyote using heat, it's a dog, and your dog, you've got a male dog that smells that and is interested in, well, there's going to be a mate of that coyote that is going to get upset and exhibit defensive behavior. This time of year, the coyotes have pups, and they will have their den built in woody areas, just like this one we see out of our window. It'll be in some thicket, very dense, where they're not normally, they feel that they're safe, they're not normally going to be disturbed. And the pups will be in there. Well, if an off-leash dog wanders near that, through the brush near that den, then those coyotes are going to act defensively. So we do ask that don't let your dogs off leash in areas that are likely to be coyote habitat, both for their sake and for the sake of the animals. And then a small dog, that's particularly true for a small dog. My mother has West Highland Terriers, and she loves them, but they're they're basically fluffy rabbits to a coyote. If the small dog is off leash, then absolutely that is potential prey for a coyote. They're not going to be distinguishing between that. One of the things that attracts rabbits, of course, are gardens. So if you have a garden where you've got a lot of food sources for rabbits in your yard, again, that's just another prey that you'd be attracting a coyote to the area. So these are the kinds of risks that that are easily managed. And if you take those simple precautions around your own home, if you're out walking a dog, then the chances of you having any kind of an adverse interaction with coyote very, very small. Now, on rare occasions, you may run into an aggressive animal. It does happen. Maybe it is a habituated animal. Maybe someone has been feeding it, and so it's approaching you and it's thinking you're going to provide it with food. If you do run into an aggressive animal, then what you do is you respond exactly the way you would do if you were ran into an aggressive off-leash dog. Right? First of all, you don't run. You make yourself big. You shout, jump up and down, throw things at it, kick at it, whatever. Coyotes are, it's not in the nature of animals, of even predators, a medium predator like that. It's not in the nature of a predator like that to attack an animal that is going to fight back effectively. So you want to make yourself look like you are not prey. And that's pretty easy to do as a human being with something the size of a coyote. Interaction may go on for several minutes, but eventually that coyote is going to give up. And then when you get the chance, get inside and call 911, report that coyote, and the police will respond. But recognize the difference between aggressive behavior and what's non-aggressive behavior. So a great example that has happened to me, I've been hiking down a trail and I've spotted a coyote, 200 feet down the trail from me, and beyond that, another group of people walking towards me. And that coyote comes out on the trail, it's trotting down the trail, looks behind it, and it starts trotting towards me. That's because there's another louder group of people down there. And when it, and in that case, when the coyote saw an opportunity to get back off the trail into the brush, that's what it did. That coyote trotting toward me was not acting aggressive. Coyotes are incredibly intelligent and curious animals. They will stop and take a look at you, try to figure out who you are. Are you a threat to them? Just to satisfy their own curiosity. A coyote that stops, looks at you, maybe even for 20, 30 seconds, is not aggressive coyote. Coyotes that are yipping and yapping in the brush behind your home, those are not aggressive coyotes. Aggressive coyote is one that is directly approaching you, coming within reach of you, and not being deterred by all of the defensive actions that you're taking, that jumping, that shouting, that throwing things. That's an aggressive coyote. So, as I said, if you do run into an aggressive coyote, at the first opportunity, get inside, call the police. If you've got your cell phone, obviously, if you've got your cell phone, you can call right away. Call the police, report the coyote. The police will respond. That's an aggressive coyote. We typically do not respond, city typically does not respond to incidental reports of coyotes. If a coyote is not, if you report a coyote, you report coyotes and you've heard them in the brush behind your home, something like that, we typically will not respond because there is no real risk in that scenario. The province will not respond at all. The province no longer responds to wildlife issues. In fact, if you look on the Environmental Bill of Rights page right now, you will see that the province has said they don't even need a wildlife strategy. They will not respond to wildlife concerns. The National Capital Commission it's much like the city. They will respond if they think there's an ongoing risk to on their federal lands, in which case they will send a conservation officer to assess the situation. So 90% of the time, 90% of the reports we get, we don't really see need to respond, there is a need for us to respond. In some cases, however, we will carry out an investigation. So where we've had repeated reports of coyotes that may be habitual, that seem to have lost their fear, or seem to be losing their fear of humans, then we will sometimes go out and investigate, usually at the request of the local council. We have to do that. We don't have, there's nobody who's assigned at the city to do that. So typically I'm the one who will respond. And I usually do so in the evenings or on a weekend. I'll combine that with my weekend bike ride or my weekend hike, and I'll go up and I'll take a look. And what I look for in those circumstances is first, obvious attractants. So an example in Councillor Brockington's ward, as you probably know, there were 2 or 3 coyotes that were trapped and removed from federal property, NCC property, in his ward last year, I think it was. I went out and I did a look at what might have been some of the causes for that conflict, and there were along the backyards of I would say half the homes backing onto that land. The property owners had put gardens in behind their homes, unfenced. Lots of vegetable material left over, lots of food for coyotes, lots of food for rabbits, and clear attractant. That's the kind of thing that I look for. I check to see if the garbage bins in our parks have been emptied or if they're overflowing. I look for any place that there may be signs of a den that are in a problem location near a school or something of that sort. I look for, are there fruit trees that are not being cleaned up? Those are the kinds of things I look for. And then typically what I will do is I'll report that information back to the councillor so they have it, and I'll report it to any department that needs to take some action. So I've reported overflowing bins to Public Works, and I once found what looked to be a sort of a day hiding space, kind of a den for some kind of animal under a portico of the school. So I brought that to the attention of the school. Happy to take questions in just a few minutes. I'm pretty close to being done. So that's kind of what we do. As I said, we have limited capacity to do that. I tend to do that on my own time. We're often asked why the city doesn't try to manage coyote populations, and the basic answer is that 2 answers. First of all, just don't have capacity. Second, it doesn't work. People have been trying to manage coyote populations, to eliminate coyotes in some cases across North America for 200 years, and it doesn't work. In urban areas, so coyotes are, as I said, they're incredibly smart, they're incredibly adaptive, so they change their behaviors very, very quickly. They also will increase their reproductive rate when densities are lower. So if there's a lower density of coyotes, their reproductive rate actually goes up. More pups survive, and so they very, very quickly fill in the available habitat. Where's I going with that? I fill in the available habitat. Yeah, so if you were to try managing coyotes, it's something you would have to then do on a continuous basis, year after year after year. And there's an expense to that. And it becomes, and after a while you begin to wonder, what is the point if we're really not having an impact? That's why, one reason why the province, in fact, does not manage coyotes. And why the province has a livestock compensation program, which is managed by the City of Ottawa. So very few people know this, but the rather than going out and trying to remove black bears and coyotes and other things that may prey on livestock, the province compensates farmers for livestock that are lost to wild animals. And our office, Natural Systems and Rural Affairs, we administer that program on behalf of the province. And we probably get, I would say, 20, 25 claims a year that come through our office for farmers who have lost livestock, almost always to coyotes in the area. It's just a much more practical, pragmatic way to go than trying to all coyotes. We don't like to remove coyotes in the urban area, individual coyotes or family groups in the urban area. That we typically try not to do that unless there's a very, very clear case of a habituated animal or several animals that are really habituated and definitely pose a risk. And that's because, as Dr. Gertz has discovered and studied well in Chicago, anytime you remove coyotes in an urban area, the coyotes that are in the surrounding urban area will almost immediately fill in that gap. So you'll remove coyotes 1 year, next year you're going to have coyotes back in there. So any kind of management like that, ongoing management like that, just really is not terribly practical. So that's why we take a risk-based approach to it. So that really is kind of the gist of it. I'll just remind you again, we do have we are reviewing our wildlife strategy, which covers not just coyotes, but spectrum of animals and potential human-animal conflicts. That is up on Engage Ottawa for public consultation. And just Google Engage Ottawa wildlife strategy. It'll take you to that consultation page. And now I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Nick. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, hello. First of all, thank you. My name's Stephen. Thank you for being here and hosting this, taking my questions. So I both live in the area and have rented properties in the area, and have been here for 20, 25 years.
Yeah.
There was a coyote problem previously. It disappeared for quite a while.
Yeah.
It's only just come back.
Yeah.
I don't know. What I do know is what I hear my tenants tell me and what I've experienced. So game, rabbits were way down. Rabbits are back up. Baby gardens. I'm just throwing out things. I don't know if you can comment on all these. Garbage, absolutely. Wild turkeys. Wild turkeys, there used to be 1 or 2 roaming around Barrhaven. Now there are herds of them everywhere. There are people, my tenants are telling me, and from living here, neighbors are anecdotally telling me, oh, it's so cute, the squirrels, the raccoons, but then we're feeding them, and the people putting out food for all these. This is all, I'm guessing, is this what raccoons eat? Like,
So
some of what they eat, like, so people are encouraging a lot more wildlife. All of a sudden I see the coyotes back here in the last 2 years.
yeah, so
All of a sudden we've been inundated.
Yeah. So that's very, very typical. The average, Dr. Gertz in Chicago found the average lifespan for an urban coyote, because of, there are lots of things, there's lots of traffic. The average age for life expectancy of urban coyote is about 2 years. Some may live longer, some less, but that's kind of the average life expectancy of coyote. And pardon?
You said 2 years?
About 2 years. Yeah. Now, in the wild, they can live longer if they're, they have the potential to live much longer than that. But that's typically the life expectancy of an urban coyote. And so, you have a coyote or a group of coyotes that has some problem behaviors. They're killed off. Other coyotes move into the area but don't have those same kind of behaviors. Again, as you pointed out, population levels of prey fluctuate up and down. broadly across the province, coyote numbers are often related to the severity of winters because they will prey on fawns and deer, particularly in the winter months, bad winters when the deer are having a hard time. So they fluctuate naturally in response to a whole lot of things. But you get almost a constant turnover of the coyotes in a particular urban area, particular urban range, and some are problems, and some are not, most are not. So, Stittsville, Councillor Gower's ward, lots of problems 2 or 3 years ago. I haven't heard really anything for the last couple of years. Councillor Brockington's ward was really a problem last year. I haven't heard so much this year. So it really varies. We get different reports across the city. Feeding wildlife. I've talked about bird feeders. Try to clean up your bird feeders. Otherwise, please don't feed wildlife.
Are there any regional, provincial, any rules against that? Because there's a
So-
lot of people who have time on their hands.
Yeah.
It's
So you can't.
anecdotal.
yeah.
I'm not like giving out addresses
Yeah.
here, but
So
they're feeding because they love seeing the ducks and the turkeys and the.
yeah. So we do sometimes run into problems on city properties where we've had people in the past who have been feeding wildlife, and if you observe someone feeding wildlife on a city property, you call it bylaw services. It is against city bylaws. On private property, the property standards bylaw actually has a provision in there about it's not specific to feeding wildlife, but activities that may attract vermin. And that
Is there a difference between, because there's some areas here that are rural, zone rural. Is there a difference in the bylaw and the zoning?
It's a good question. I'm not sure if what the difference there is between.
I don't think property standards differs.
Yeah, I don't think it does. This is my colleague in person. She's younger and has a better memory for these
I'm just absolutely.
things.
So they can, sorry, I'm not
So you
following
could-
as
so
well.
you could-
They can or can't and visit them, whether it's rural or urban, like feed.
I would double check the bylaw, but I don't believe that there's a difference between urban and rural. And if you are carrying out any activity that will attract quote vermin, which can include coyotes, sure can include any animal that's creating a nuisance, then there can be orders given under this property standards bylaw and charges.
Okay, so maybe I'll come talk to you as opposed to taking up all the time
Sure.
and get too specific, but thank you.
I'll just mention turkeys, squirrels. We see all kinds of problematic human behaviors. And I was out a couple of weeks ago at Barrhaven-West. If you know the boardwalk at Barrhaven-West in the parking lot, there's a lovely bird feeder, big bird feeder there, and lots of people love it. And there was a fellow who was literally sitting under the bird feeder trying to feed turkey by hand. These are the kinds of behaviors that are really bad for those animals because it just promotes conflicts and it never has a good outcome. Yes, ma'am.
So I live in Orchard Estates right inside here, and I've noticed it more so because I have a dog. And it started like, I saw coyote in winter time, like you said, they come more in winter. Like I was close to my patio door, and it just scares me so much. So I don't even leave her out without me standing there, whether it's -20, -30, I'm there. Because although she's a medium-sized dog, I'm not sure how they attack, whether they're in groups or behind the bushes. And even when I take up a walk, I actually drive past Cedar View in the trail near the railway tracks, and I used to walk her in winter there because I never let her, although we have almost an acre lot, I don't leave her outside because of these coyotes. I'm just scared what if I'm inside and it attacks my dog.
So does your property backs onto a natural area, does it?
Well, it's no fence, right? It's all like these acre lots are all open. There are trees in the back. They hide behind those trees.
Yeah, they will, absolutely.
Yeah, and they come out when they want and they howl and you can hear them. I've seen them, so I've been taking pictures as close as like, you can see, and they look at you. They actually, when I'm taking a picture, they're staring at me and they walk by.
Yeah. So So there's a couple of things that you might want to consider there. First of all, you want to check right around the periphery of your house for any obvious food sources for coyotes. That's the first thing. The foundations of houses also tend to attract insects. So you go along with the foundation of your house, the outside wall, you'll often find insects of one kind or another there, at which mice and voles love to come and prey on, and they may be attracting coyotes around the edge, particularly if your yard is unfenced and they have free access to it. So, the first thing you probably want to consider is a fenced area where you can let your dog off, so that coyotes are excluded from that area. And then the other thing is you want to make sure that coyotes are never comfortable in your backyard. And there's a technique called hazing, which we strongly recommend. If you find there's a coyote in your backyard, then you want to discourage them from seeing that as a safe place. So step out if you're comfortable enough. Step out on your back step, your patio, with a pot and pan. Bang away on that. Hurl abuse at them. Anything to make them recognize that this is not a safe space for them.
How about lights, like in the night, or they have siren? Actually, in Amazon, I got something called Coyote siren. You can put them on the trees and stuff, but I don't think it's.
Coyotes are very, very smart and very, very
Yeah.
adaptable. A lot of wildlife is surprisingly adaptable. But just if you don't mind, just a quick anecdote. A number of years ago, they had a really bad gull problem at the Carver landfill. And they brought in a contractor. Pardon?
Mayor's Hawk.
No, that's the city's landfill. But at the Carver landfill, they brought in a contractor to control the gulls. So the contractor would go in and they would fire noisemakers and they would let a dog run loose over the top of the hill. But they were only doing it Monday to Friday. And after several weeks, the gulls would avoid the place Monday to Friday, but would be there on the weekends. And they adapted that quickly to it. And coyotes are even more intelligent. So noisemakers, anything like that, first of all, it's probably going to annoy your neighbors. And coyote, ultimately, it's not going to happen long term.
But if they do attack a dog, what do you do? Is anything you can do?
Well, it's usually, as I said, if it's a larger dog, it's almost always a defensive attack of some sort. And we want to prevent, I hate to recommend intervening because that's when people get bit. When the dog is being attacked by a coyote and they attempt to intervene and then the coyote bites them. But you want to prevent that from ever arising. So make your yard an unsafe space for them. Fence your yard off. Those are the things I'm going to do. Yes, ma'am.
I think.
Was you first? Oh, I'm sorry.
No worries. Just on the point about fence,
Yes.
I'm fairly certain when I looked it up, coyotes can jump higher than the city limit for a fence. So I don't know that that's an appropriate measure to take.
Coyotes are actually very good at scaling fences.
Yeah.
But it's also a matter of perception and them feeling trapped, right? If your fence, it's not an area that they can get over a fence, but it's not easy. And it's that perception. So first of all, you're cutting off their sight lines, so they can't see what's in the yard that might attract them. And then there's that feeling of confinement that they can't escape as quickly as they want. So yeah, they can, a determined coyote will probably get past a fence, but it's still a great deterrent to a coyote.
But I feel like in the Cedar Hill community, at least, like no one has. And it's at what point are you willing to fence up your whole yard if it's not going to guarantee anything?
Well, your whole yard or a portion of it.
Yeah. And from, just so I'm well aware of the areas you're talking about here. I think you're certainly looking at a solution that probably from the suburban, townhouse perspective would be one thing, but I think you're talking about a different type of environment that I understand your perspective. It it would be a challenge to fence off an area
Yeah.
like that.
And moreover, where I live, the property is backed by a pond. And I believe the coyotes come from a forest behind and cross the pond in the winter, which is frozen. And so there's no way of really preventing that from happening.
You're quite right.
Yeah.
Places where they tend to, I've seen this several places. The issue we had in Stittsville a number of years ago was actually a dry stormwater pond owned by the city. And the pond itself is this clear area. It's kept clear of vegetation. And then there was a berm along the back, and behind the berm was the creek with dense forest. And so it was perfect for the coyotes because they could, in the middle of the night, they want to congregate, they can come up on, they're coming up onto the berm. It gave them a great view over the grassy snow-covered stormwater pond, so they could see any threats coming. They had the brush to retreat to if they needed to, and that's something I've seen in a number of parks. It's probably similar conditions that you described.
Yeah.
It's that trade-off, right? We want to have access to nature. We want to have access to the beauty of nature. We want to have access to wildlife. The trade-off is sometimes we may have conflicts in there. I can't tell you the best way to resolve that. I can only suggest some strategies.
So in my situation, there's literally a pack of wolves. Our bedroom's on the main floor. There's
Yeah.
literally a pack of wolves in our neighbor's yard. We can see them behind the trees, and we can see them during the day as well, just in our yard, no problem. We don't have compost. We don't have bird feeders. We don't have a garden. We don't have pets. We don't have any of those risk factors you indicated, nor does anyone on our cul-de-sac. I know all my neighbors. In fact, my direct neighbors are my in-laws, and so it's just really challenging when here we have to coexist with coyotes. Like at what point it's almost causing a loss of enjoyment of your property. Do you know what I mean?
Well, again, so a couple of things. First, I understand. I have granddaughters.
Yeah.
They live in the country. This is something that they deal with. It's how do they coexist with coyotes and so on. So I understand the concern you have.
Sorry to interrupt, but is that really the same? If you choose to live in the country, you accept the wildlife. We're living in the city and we're being inundated.
Well,
The choice to live in the city is to be away from wildlife.
Well, the city of Ottawa, you got to keep in mind though, it's pretty diverse. Like there's a difference between urban core, the outer urban, suburban, rural. And so I can appreciate that there's a bit of a difference in terms of but I understand your point.
Yeah, and I do too. The other aspect of that is, practically, if we were to go in and remove those coyotes, first of all, when the city removes coyotes, we kill them. And so we're not allowed to relocate coyotes by the province, so they're trapped and killed. And so, so that's the first thing. We kill it. If we have to go in, we'll kill them. And coyotes will be back next year because they will move in from adjacent areas.
Recording in progress.
That's just the way, just the behavior. So really, all we can recommend is looking at your individual situation, minimizing the risk as much as possible.
Yeah.
Making your yard an uninviting place if it's possible to do so, and where it's feasible to do so, it's involved. That's really all I can suggest.
Right. But in this, you mentioned that you guys are reevaluating the wildlife strategy.
Yeah.
Is there any sort, because I am aware that you can't relocate more than 1 kilometer by law. Is that something that's being reevaluated?
No, because that's provincial rules.
Okay.
Prevent us from doing that. On rare occasions, they will give exceptions, but they won't do it routinely. And they don't like doing it for coyotes because if you relocate a coyote, where do you relocate it to? who wants a problem coyote relocated near their home? We do that, and down the road, a farmer loses sheep, or someone then starts encountering an aggressive coyote. There are obvious issues there. No one wants a problem coyote relocated to them.
And it's probably already.
And there are, if it's suitable habitat for a coyote, there are coyotes there. Yeah.
Was there a question back here?
Yeah, I'm in a similar situation because I live in Cedar Hill as well. But I believe they live right beside me in an empty lot, and it's like forest in this little empty lot. And there's a little bit of a ditch beside our place, and I have two big dogs, and they're on an electric fence, so not on. In Cedar Hill, you can't have the solid fence anyway. It's part of the bylaw here. So we've actually been like harassed by coyotes. Like, I mean, going around our house, trying to agitate the dog, and the dogs are inside. And it's just the last 2 years have been wicked. And I mean, not the daily. And when you call in the city and they say, well, that we're just tracking them. Well, they're here. They're here the day, they're here the night. They're antagonizing the dogs outside. And I've got like a whistle going. I've got like my dog's electric fence thing so that they'll come back very quickly. I don't know what else to do. Like, I'm hazing like you wouldn't believe it, but it doesn't matter to them. And they come like 10 o'clock in the daytime. They come through at supper time. We don't have any bird feeders. We're not feeding them. Nobody on our street is. Like, I don't know what the problem is. That's like too close to children for me.
Well, it's one of those it's one of those difficult situations. I don't have a good answer. Practically, it's a very difficult situation to resolve. As I mentioned, even if we went in and removed those coyotes, next year there will be more coyotes. Because that's what we do.
Because like we were there 25 and a half years in that same spot. I've always had dogs. I'd see an occasional coyote years ago, whatever. The last 2 years.
Are you not seeing a lot more wild turkeys?
Yeah, turkeys.
They're everywhere.
Yeah.
And landscape, the landscape can also change and provide better habitat. So, if you, and most of, a lot of areas have actually regrown, revegetated in Ottawa over the past 25, 30 years. Old fields that were abandoned, brownfield sites that have not been developed, brush grows up. It provides a perfect area for coyotes to build a dens because it's well screened. Sometimes changes in the landscape like that can change the suitability of the habitat for coyotes, and they may move in, be in a more dense area. More dense on the landscape in some areas. Again, I don't have an easy solution for you there. It sounds like you're taking what precautions you can. I can only encourage you to keep doing that. The province isn't going to respond, and you don't have the capacity to go out and remove problem coyotes. I say problem coyotes, remove coyotes wherever there is some kind of conflict.
They're not likely to live on their own, though, because they got named in the lot next to it, right?
Well, yeah, they probably got it, as you say.
They got an acre right there.
There may be good habitat there. There may be good food sources in the area. One of the things that I find really associated with problems is abandoned orchards. So a couple of places where I've done investigations, a lot of these old fields have old apple trees. And the apple trees
You just described orchard estates.
well, orchard, yes, I guess orchard estates.
I mean, that is exactly what is just south of there is a huge abandoned orchard.
Yeah, and there's lots of windfall fruit. They'll dig down through the snow to get that in the wintertime. that it will also attract rodents and rabbits and other things. It's fantastic habitat.
I think we'll keep in contact on this,
Yeah.
just to understand kind of the nature of, I think, the uniqueness of that area. Because certainly what I don't want to see is us get into a state where there's a safety issue when we're talking about, kids in backyards and such, where there's a pack of coyotes, next door kind of thing. That is a nerve-wracking comment to hear.
And the limiting fencing is a mitigating factor as well.
I'm happy to chat with Councillor Hill about that.
Yeah, because I
And
think
arrange to go out and take a closer look at
yeah,
it.
I think there is a uniqueness about that community in particular that we need to perhaps take a bit of a closer look at. So I appreciate the comments that I've heard there from the folks up in Cedar Hill. Yes, Randy.
I read somewhere a while ago that the coyotes use a trick with dogs, is that they try to play with the dog, have fun with the dog, and then they'll lead the dog off to the pack for ultimately a kill. Let's be specific. Is there any truth to that you know?
I've heard the same reports. I haven't read any studies that actually looked at that, but I have heard the same anecdotal
I
reports.
was just thinking,
Yeah.
listening to what this lady was saying, if they know the dog's
Yeah.
in there.
But also bear in mind that the city of Ottawa does have bylaws regarding animal control, and your dogs should not be in a position where they can wander off the property with coyotes, because they are supposed to be under control. So, off leash dogs are always going to be at a higher risk, whether they're a small animal that may be prey or they're a larger animal that that may incite defensive behavior from coyotes. That's always going to be true, as will outdoor cats.
One other question. You're probably aware of all the walking trails that are back of the Nepean Sportsplex.
Mhm.
And about a year and a half ago, my wife and I had almost an encounter with two big coyotes. There was people walking ahead of us, and they had seen them, and they turned back. One of them was really panicked that there was coyotes there. And they came down, they were walking the trail we were on coming towards us, 90-degree turn. And I suppose we're 3 times as far as I am from you from that turn. And they just came down the trail, and fortunately they kept going straight. They didn't make a left-hand turn, so to speak. What would you say you do in a case like that as an individual?
Absolutely nothing. Those coyotes were not acting in any aggressive way.
You think they'd walk right on by you just like an individual?
No, I don't think they would. They probably wouldn't pass by you. They were probably aware that you were there and avoided you, and that's what coyotes will typically do. As I said, they're intelligent, curious. They may stop and look at you, but they're really not aggressive behavior. It's really, if they're approaching you, they're not being scared off. They get within reach, and they're not responding to any of your attempts to dissuade them. That's aggressive behavior, and that's when you respond as you would to any other aggressive dog, and call the police at the first opportunity.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. No, appreciate it. Are there any other questions? If not, there is some coffee at the back, or if you want to grab a Tim's or something, feel free to do that. But I appreciate Yes. Yes.
I just had a question about cleanliness in parks. I know there's, I'm not sure if you're familiar with I can't remember the name of the park, but it's closest to the intersection of Sherway and Tedwin. It's a mostly forested park, but it has like a nice path walking through it, and it backs onto the school school, it's near the Walter Baker Center where those schools are. There's been a few coyote sightings, and attacks on, small dogs. And I actually personally lost a cat, from that park. Would you recommend increasing the cleanliness to try and deter the coyotes from that area?
Well, so if I would I would recommend speaking to Public Works, to Parks and Maintenance, Parks and Facilities about that. You can do that directly by calling 311, or you can do that through the councilor's office. If there are obvious issues of cleanliness, if garbage cans have not been emptied, if they're, one of the issues we're running into now, of course, is seeing encampments in some of our natural areas. If there's an encampment, people have left food or garbage there, that's another thing. You can contact the Parks Department either directly or through the council's office to get cleaned up. Yeah, absolutely. If there is an issue of cleanliness, then yes, you should.
Had you sent a note about that to my office?
I think we spoke about it when you went door to door before you
Okay,
realized.
you know what, well, let's follow up afterwards. I'll get your address and we'll write the issue down specifically, and I'll make sure that we follow it up with Works, okay?
Okay, sure.
Perfect. Any other specific questions on this? Well, if there's not, I would recommend, if you want to stick around, grab a coffee and have a chat on any topic, you're more than welcome to come talk one-on-one with Nick or myself or with Russell and or Sharon. We've got at the back there too as well, who manages most of the casework as well. So other than that, thank you very much. If you wish to stick around, stick around. If you want to head out and get back home, feel free to do that. But thank you very much for coming on. Thank you, Nick, for taking your time to talk to us about the issues.
My pleasure, and as I said, I'd be happy to chat with you about Cedarville.
Perfect. Yeah, it is a unique spot from a wildlife perspective because it's right on the cusp. It is zone rural, and there's some interesting, unique pieces there. So
I'd like to hear more about the rules around fencing. Maybe that's something we should take a look at.
yeah, well, we can follow that up for sure.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
My
Yeah.
pleasure.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It's really unique because it's yes.
Whenever you're ready. No,
Yeah, no,
thank you,
so we
John.
can-
Thank you so much.
My
It was
pleasure.
very informative. It was great. Appreciate it.
Thank you.